Oh no! Oh. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing an annual summary of all the books I've read in 2024. Before we get into this pile, I would like to tell you a little bit more about the corner I'm sitting in now. My mom helped me decorate it during the weekend, so big shout out to her. I have a habit of keeping all the books I've read in one pile. So at the end of the year, a shadow girl like me who lives in social media time could have taken a photo with them, with all of them, and tell people that actually I did achieve something this year, which it sounds great. And sometimes I could have looked back to all the books I've read and pick one of them up again. So this is the books I've read in 2023. And we'll get back to some of them because I did found some absolute personal favorites among them. Here's the Lego typewriter. I do hope you can see them at the end of this video when this pile goes here. Now, 2024 for me is the most special year of my life ever. I've done things that I'm really proud of. I've finished my first novel. What's a cliche thing to say, right? Every writer would tell you that, oh, I always wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. And it's the same thing for me too. During the process, I have came across a lot of great books in the journey. Some of them are just personal leisure reading that I really enjoy doing before bed or in the metro or on the way. And some I've learned a lot from the writers in the journey. So there are 40 of them in total. I have divided them into, I think, 5 groups. First, we have literature, some of the best writers in human history, a genre that I adore the most. Then we have commercial fictions, which I was a huge Poirot fan growing up. So detective stories and sci-fi stories, I can't resist. And then we have a small section of Somerset Maugham because I'm a huge fan of him. I think Maugham would probably be my favorite writer #1. So I've read a lot of his work. Next, we have a section about writing, about talking about how to write or writer's memoir. Last but not least, we have a small nonfiction section. As this is not Lord of the Rings movie series marathon, we are just going to comment each book with a few sentences. But I do want to say I find tremendous joy in reading most of them, which I know 40 books is not a lot compared to booktubers or professional readers or authors. But I think what matters the most is we find the spark of reading, of spending time alone, of came across someone living in the past that has a connection with you. I think that's the most important thing. So here we go. First up is literature. We will start with an old friend of ours, Recible Amour by Milan Kundera. It's lightly put, hilariously styled short story collection that talks about men and women and desire and the complexity of love and life. If you like Kundera's work, you were gonna love it because I'm gonna to make a very weird comparison, okay? I do Olympic weightlifting, and snatching is the most complicated and difficult movement, one of, in Olympic weightlifting.
Whoa, wow.
It looks easy, it's beautiful, it's elegant, but it takes a lot of effort to get it right and get it good. To me, Kundera is like a snatch professional. He has a way to put things, heavy things, into a lightly matter. And it's easy to read, but if you want to go deep and serious, you could have done that. And we love him for it. Next, we have another old friend of ours, Márquez, Love in the Time of Cholera. I don't know why I haven't read it until now. I feel like I should have read it years ago. And I got this edition for a very specific reason, because it was shown in a chick flick movie. I would say it's a encyclopedia, a book about love. And I disagree with people who think it's not love, or what they did in the book was wrong and the book needed to be cancelled. I don't agree with that. I think it was heartbrokenly accurate and relatable for anyone who had been in and out of love. I won't read it the second time, not because it's bad. I think it's a masterpiece, just like all Márquez's work. But it's too on point, and it hit me deeply. But I still love it. I will give it a 10 out of 5-star rating. Next one, we have a short story collection from Machado de Assis. I hope I get his name right. A friend of mine recommended it. I love it. I think it's pure literature on its best golden form. You got history, you got politics, you got destiny, you got fantasies, all summarized in short stories. It was like a great wave of ocean that I'm willingly and happily drawn myself in. Next, we got The Largest of the Sea Maiden by Denis Johnson. I read this book on my way to New York City for my first ever solo travel at the beginning of this year to celebrate my 30th birthday. I arrived in New York during winter in January, and coincidentally, this book is also sharp and cold and a little bit gloomy, like New York's winter. I think it would be better to read it when you were a little bit tipsy, if you drink. Also, I think you will love it on a trip, especially to New York. So I think it's a beautiful coincidence, and we love it for that. Next, we have 3 of Oscar Wilde, because during this summer I went to Paris with my best friend, and we went to visit the tomb of Oscar Wilde because we just love him so much. He's still classical, witty, smart, and I want to say fashion. So I reread some of his work when we came back. The first one is the short stories of Oscar Wilde. I think it has 5 or 4 stories in it. It's gothic, mystery, magical, you can even say dark. It has a wild style interpretation of life, because he said on the cover, most men and women are forced to perform parts of which they have no qualifications. It was a little bit sad, but he's a great storyteller, and you can't put it down. You can you can read it in like an afternoon. So we love it. We recommended it. And then we have a bedtime story that I had, The Nightingale and the Rose. He said it was written not for children but for childlike people from 18 to 80, and I strongly agree. You can put it up anytime. If you have a bad day and it's cold outside, or it's raining, it's gloomy, it's dark, you felt like your world is about to end, I would go to bed and cuddle myself with a blanket and read this book, and we love it. Next, we have another Wilde, because we simply can. This one is Salome and the Picture of Dorian Gray. I have read both stories a few times, but I just love to keep going back to them. It has the typical sharpness of Wilde, the bittersweet, and the stylishly put sentences and dialogues, sharp words. It's a great read, and it's heartbroken to see all the characters in both stories are losing things that they can't help with. I think that's part of the reason why people love Wilde till now. He has a way to lightly, stylishly, beautifully put out the uncomfortable and unavoidable hard truth about life. And I think even till this day, people love him for that. And also his mean mouth. Next, we have Fictions by Borges. This is the first Borges I read in my life, I think, yes. Can you be more philosophical or metaphysical in a story? Because before I read this, I can never imagine someone doing that. Turns out, yes, you can. It's incredibly well written, plotted. Also, I personally I think the special thing about Borges is he has a way to evoke all your senses with words. You feel like you can smell things, you can taste things, you heard things. It's a magical experience, but it's not that easy to read. I have to admit that. It's probably me, but once you get into it, it's really, really good, and we love it. And the next is Great Noise by Kafka. This is a unfinished manuscript by Kafka, but you can see how he edited and cut pieces as he writes, and you can see all those thought process. It's really difficult to read, I have to say, because Kafka itself, it's not easy to let it sink in. This one it gets harder, but as someone who also writes, it's very interesting to see how his view changes between each version. And I think for anyone who likes Kafka or loves to write, I think you should read it. Next, we have Matisse Stories by A.S.Byatt. And the reason I put a Matisse here today, I came across it when I was shopping in a bookstore. I have never heard of Byatt before, but for some reason I bought it. Maybe because my mom and I was shopping and we both love Matisse. I'm really glad I bought this book. It's colorful, it's feminine, it's British in terms of style. It has a soft but determined approach towards humanity with a special focus on women who lives in mentally difficult environments. It's like staring at a painting, and some of the brush work reminded you of things you have came across with in life. Yes, it has that magic, and we love her for that. Next, we have 11 Kinds of Loneliness by Richard Yates. I think he's a writer that we all underestimated, but I don't like this book. I will say I hate it, but I don't like it. Not because it's bad written, or because I can't get it, or because we didn't click. We did click. We clicked maybe a little bit too much. It's so accurately depicts loneliness and the desperation of life. It's really hard to read because it makes me uncomfortable. It triggers all the desperation and loneliness and all the sadness in my mind. I have to stop every few pages. I have to say it's wonderfully written, painfully well written. And I think that's part of the reason Richard Yates didn't become one of the top selling authors in his time, because it's uncomfortable. And yes, sometimes we need that uncomfortable feeling in our life. I recommend it, but we'll just treat it with caution. Next, we have a all-time classic, Uncle Vanya by Chekhov, a short script with a broad theme about life, society, and humanity. The society here has long gone, but it remained relevant to our today's life, I think. I especially love the missed bullets. I think it was the best part of the plot. It's absurd in its own way, and it was a great read. Next, we have Miguel Street by Naipual. This is the first Naipual I've read. A book that I don't enjoy particularly, but I respect tremendously. Great reading, fantastic characters. It provided a picture of how the other side of the world left, but it was not a leisure light read. I specifically liked the last page, only the last page, because it had a special feeling of the nostalgia you had when you look back in your life. Maybe it was 5 years ago, but it felt like a century ago, that kind of feeling. If you have never, I have never read Naipual, but I'm willing to try more, and I think this is a great start. Also because it's short collections, so you can just pick up some pages and each day. We like it. Next, we have Lassie, is it Lassie? By Domenico Starnone. an Italian writer. It's wow, it's shockingly great, shockingly great. Someone should make it into a movie. You know, Netflix, HBO, or Hulu. Please, I think it's your move now. It's crucial. It's brutal, dark, heartless, and a complicated interpretation of marriage and family. It's amazing how a great story can be written in such a tiny book and few pages. I love it. It's a puzzle. It's almost by the end of the book, you will understand why it's called Lazy. I hope, I ask, I demand that someone make it into a TV show or a movie. I think it would be great because it will give you the goosebump and the chill. And by the end of this story, you will doubt everything you have came across in your life as well, like I did. Next, we have Sexing the Cherry by Jeannette Winterson. I need to organize my words to describe this book. Sick, bloody, feminine, evil, naive, satirical, modern fairy tale, and English. Do you think, if you think all these adjectives cannot be put into describing one book, you should read it, because after you read it, you will understand I am not exaggerating. Some of them are extremely feminine, and we love it for that. It's a retell of all the Prince Charming stories, but some were just, wow, you have to put it down and give yourself a few seconds like, what did I just read? But after a while, you will find the power and magic inside her words. I'm not gonna say I love it, but I recommend you read it. Next, oh my god, this book get me PTSD. I have no words to describe it. This one is The Secret History of the Lord of Musashi by Tanizaki Junichiro. The most uncomfortable read and disgusting book I have ever read in my whole life. I could read Godfather when I was 12 and I was fine with the horse and the blood and all that, but I'm not fine with this. It's a sick story. It has twisted sexual desire, a lot of human body and face involved. It's just sick. Someone should tell the author that something in his mind is wrong. But it was fun to think about a literature pretended to be so it's a fake history, but he put it in a way it felt like a real history. I think it's really fun to see how, in the literature perspective, history can be created and how people's sexual desire could be twisted. And maybe Freud should read it because he would have a lot of things to say about the protagonist here. I think it's fun in its own way, but it's just disgusting. Someone should get help, and it's not me. Last one for the literature, we have Oh, What a Paradise It Seems by John Cheever. This is also the first John Cheever I have ever read. How can someone be so talented? You know, I always think that talent are like natural beauty. You see it, you read it, you look at it, you know it's there. That's how I felt about John Cheever. All the characters, the words, the sentence, the plots. It's just pure talent that none of us can have ever had. And I think it's a privilege to have came across John Cheever. I read it on a plane back home. By the time I got off the plane, I felt like I was a different person because someone showed me a shred of true meanings about life. That's how great this book is. On to the commercial section. First, we have, best-selling author Richard Osman, The Last Devil to Die, A Thursday Murder Club Mystery. I love Thursday Murder Club Mystery. I think it's warm, it's funny, it's also a little bit sad if you know what's going on in this series. It's sweet, cozy murder, on its best form. But this one still, as all Richard Osman's stories, light on the murder, heavy on the cozy. But I'm reading his latest work, We Solve Murder, and so far I'm on 1/3 now, I think. I'm not impressed. I have no idea why, but it just doesn't click with me like all the 4 sweet characters here. And we'll see about that. But this one we love. We love it. I would love to hang out with all the 4 main characters as much as I could. And I can't wait to see it in the cinema, because I know one of the book was adapted into movies now. We love it. Next, we have Isaac Asimov's short story collection. This is volume 1. I left volume 2 in my office, and I was told there were others to come later. What can I possibly say about Asimov? The GOAT, the greatest of all time. Interesting, thought-provocative, extremely talented, some pretty funny, and some discussed our relationship with machine, with AI. I think it laid foundations of my world in sci-fi genre, because Asimov was one of the first sci-fi writers I have read, and I do think now, especially now, we should all read Asimov's work, because it gives us a chance to rethink our relationship with technology, especially in today's world, right? If you know, you know. Love them. Next, we have Il est de deux fois by French author Franck Thilliez. Best detective story I have read this year. It's an intellectual maze full of twists, blood, human organs, and skins. Yes, you heard me right. It's intellectually challenged because you have to guess the answer. I love a good puzzle. And it leans more towards crime story than detective story. But I don't care what genre it is, okay? I love it either way. Recommended it. Next, we have the Diogenes Variations by Hong Kong author Chen Haoji. The Chinese name of this is 第二跟你变奏曲. Extremely talented. He wrote about detective stories, thriller stories, crime stories with a classical music element. My favorite 2 elements combined. How can I not love it? Great puzzles in each stories, and it's mainly in the Honkaku detective story style. So if you love Japanese detective stories, you would love it. And it's a great read. Some of the answers here shocked me, and some it has a little bit of the urban feeling from a metropolitan city like Hong Kong. So I don't know if there's an English version. I read it in Chinese version. I recommend everyone who loves detective stories, go read it. I can't wait to read more of his work. Okay, we love him. Next, we have Our Man in Havana by Greene. It's not what I expected in terms of spy novels. Not as fun as I thought it would be as well, because I was told it was a hilarious book. It was okay. It comes light, and some pages did make me laugh, and also it's a very well crafted plot. It has this irony and absurd feeling of life, and we like it. Okay. Next, we have The Twist of a Knife by Anthony Horowitz. I'm so sorry if I offended anyone. Okay, I'm going to be brutally honest here. I don't like the book. I have high expectation of him. I think I don't like the book, not because it's not funny, or it's not relevant, or it's not a well-staged crime. You know what you're getting. You got what you paid for. But I didn't feel the spark in it. It didn't give me thrill by the time the grand review appeared. Still, it's a great book to read if you have an afternoon to pass and you have some great snack and there's sunshine outside but you don't want to get out, and you are sitting in your living room and just lying there, want something to just kill the time. If that's the case, okay, go read it. But for me, it's nothing very special, and I'm so sorry if there's any of his fans. I didn't mean to insult you or him. Next, we have some of Somerset Maugham's work. Now, I have read almost all of his work because I'm a huge fan. I think of him as a mean but funny, also talented uncle who might refuse to stay in his hometown, who always starts a fight with the family during Christmas dinner, but who also has the utmost witty and wisdom. I like to read all of his work because I'm curious what he think about life and so many topics. That's why I read his work. So we'll start with The Narrow Corner. It's a adventure, conspiracy, exotic novel. It's also a tragedy with his usual pessimism. Not Maugham's best work, I have to say, but it's great in terms of plotting. And I like his short story collection much, much better. But if you like his work and you want to kill some time, it's worth to read. Just for the beautiful writing itself, it's worth it. And we recommended it. Now, one of his most famous work, Of Human Bondage. Oh, what a book. It's my book of life, I could say that. A map from someone who had experienced all the heartbroken, the love lost, life grown up. It gave me comfort during a very difficult and dark time of my life, but I don't think you should read it if you're too young. I mean, 16, 18, 25. It's just my opinion. You're not gonna hate it if you get through the first few pages. You probably won't enjoy it as much as if you read it when you're older. Because I think for me, if I read it when I was 18, I would think it's one of the worst books I have ever read. But now I found it incredibly moving and comforting. So, my book of life. Next, we have Up at the Villa, a tiny, short story by Maugham. Sophisticated gossip story about an upper class woman, an upper class beautiful woman. You can sort of tell there is a story to unfold. Sharp observation about love and relationship and society. It's a fun read. Well, though it does get slightly uncomfortable at the end. I like it. I think it's a great read. Next one, wow, Christmas Holiday. Last night before bed, I was thinking about if I should do a video just about this book and upload it during Christmas time. And then I tell myself no, because it would be too cruel and unpolite, because this is not a fancy, cozy Christmas story. This is a little bit uncomfortable, but as I said before, sometimes we need the uncomfortable. He is the cool uncle that pointing out the lies of in your life, of your family, and is just coldly observing the world and the hypocrites. Also, this book was recommended by Borges, said it was God's work. For this sentence only, you should have read it. Next, we have The Magician, the only man I have ever read that I absolutely hated. I regret reading it because the plot was great, but I don't like the primes. I hate the villain in it because he was unnecessarily ugly and unpleasant and disgusting. It's not the point. I think if the villain was somehow presentable and even pleasant to talk with, this book would be 100 times better. The whole point of the villain's existence is to make you uncomfortable. But that was not the point of this story. I think it was a miscalculation in terms of plotting. And it was supposed to be a dangerous and even erotic story. I didn't feel any of it. I just felt disgusted. So for me, I don't like it. But if you like it, I'm really sorry. And I do hope if someone wanted to change it, adapt it into a TV series or a movie, please find a handsome villain. I'm not saying it in a shallow way. I can deal with unpleasant villain. It didn't help the story, I think. Also, it kind of made me uncomfortable, and sick reading it. So that's why I don't like it. But if anybody else like it, I apologize. Next, we have Strictly Personal. This is a memoir of Maugham during his Second World War time. I'm not a history fan. I read it only because I'm a Maugham fan, and I wanted to know what his life was during Second World War because he had been to the First World War and he was a spy. It provided a unique and personal aspect in terms of telling that part of the story. My favorite uncle telling me a part of history that I would have never find out otherwise. And I just want to hang out with him more, listening to his stories, his life in the past day. Any topic would do, and this time it's history, and I loved it. Last part of this station, the summing up. I read it because I was writing my story at that time. I want to know what he think of writings, stories, creative process. It's an honest literature memoir. Best choice for Maugham fans or writers. Great comparison to Kundera or Pamuk's literature analysis. It's also witty as usual. And the reason I put this as the last book of this part is to bring up some of the books about writing I read this year. Stephen King on Writing, a memoir of the craft. It taught me some basic rules about writing and editing. It's witty, straightforward as usual, as Stephen King always is. It encouraged me greatly because when I read it, I was on my way to finish my first novel. I was almost there, but there felt like a destination I could have never reached. And the book was a friend to me. He was holding my hands in the dark and telling me that it's okay, you will get there. We have all been there. It was great comfort for me to know that even the great Stephen King has struggles and rejections just like me. I don't know if you have ever done 100 burpees in a row. The most difficult thing about 100 burpees was not doing it, was the thinking of doing it, was when you were on your 70th or 80th rep and you felt like you could have never finished the rest 20 or 30. But in fact, you could have. You thought you would die, but you won't. All you need sometimes was a little determination and encouragement that, you know what, I'm gonna get there. This book was the encouragement you need, and I recommend everybody to read it because this was one of the best books I have read last year. Next we have How Fiction Works by James Wood. It taught me a whole new system about not just writing but also reading. I found some details that I have never thought about when reading a story. I have viewed literature different after reading this book. So a book I will constantly go back to because I enjoyed it and it's extremely useful. Next one, Kazuo Ishiguro Interview Collection. I read this as a part of my self-taught lessons on writing. This book is a summarization of all his 18 interviews in 20 years. Some of the questions were constantly repeating itself and it's really annoying to read. It's a waste of time. But the other part of the interview, he provided lengthy answers in terms of his thoughts on history, his self-identity, and his creative process. You can see the changes of his answers during the years. So I think for that part, this is a great book. Next, we have No Time to Spare. I recommended it on my first video. Welcome to check it. I will put the link in the description box. An intimate review about aging, death, society, writing, and cats. Cats. How can you say no? It's especially to the cats. You'll love it if you are a Greene fan. Last part, we're almost there. Last part is nonfiction. I specifically love to read about psychology and classical music, but this book is the exception that I have and everyone should have. All That Moves Us, a pediatric neurosurgeon, his young patients and their stories of grace and resilience by J. Wellons. The best book I have read my entire life. If there's a list of top 10, it's there. And it's getting very close to the top 5. It fundamentally changed my view on death and life. I was sobbing 70% of the time during reading it. I have to put the pages down, go back to it. I will make a video just for this book because how elegantly he wrote. I later learned the doctor was a literature major before he went to medical school, and it explained why this book was just pure fantastic. I bought a lot of copies for my friends. I want everybody to read it. I hope everybody could read it. Life itself, sometimes you think life is meaningless, it's a mess, it's a void, but after you read it, sometimes you will hold the book in front of your chest and tell yourself that, you know what, life is not so bad because there were a lot of beauty in it, and this book was one of the beauty of it. I highly recommended it. Next, we have A Road to Classical Music by Chinese author Zhao Yuanpu. My 2024 top 5, I think. When I read it, I didn't have any expectation of all because classical music books sometimes were dull or too academical or just boring. But this book, a classical music introduction, but with art, stories, literature and photography elements, and some gossip from all the musicians. It's easy to read, but full of information, and it's, first of all, it's extremely enjoyable to read. It's a great, he had a great way to lay it all out and to put it, and he had his humor. It gave me the thrill that I rarely find in terms of nonfiction books, and I recommend it. Oh, also, if you were kind of into classical music, but you were like me, before I was into this, I knew almost nothing about it. I have a lot of questions in terms of going to the concert, listening to music, what should I listen, how I should listen it. You should read this because this is a very simple, easy introduction, and you will love it because you will laugh. Next, we have The Charm of Lacan's Thoughts by Chinese authors Wang Renchen-Xi, Zhang Tao, Chen Jingxiao. This was one of the books I read at the beginning of this year when I was just being introduced to Lacan. A clear and relatively easy to read essays in terms of introducing who Lacan is and what his thoughts were. If you read in Chinese, I recommended it because it's easy to put in terms of comparing to other Lacan's work. And it gave me a lot of thinking, not just in terms of psychology. I know nothing about psychology. I'm just interested in it. But it gives me a lot of thoughts about life and my relationship with others, with life itself, and with myself. And it's not a very hard read. I recommended it. Next, we have another Lacan, A Companion to Jacques Lacan by Chinese author Yan Helai. This one, compared to this one, is slightly harder to read because it demonstrates Lacan's theory about how clinical psychoanalysis should be. It inspired some thoughts about how Lacan viewed his work and life in terms of, you can see the three circles here were the main portion of his theory. It was a little bit too academical, and it was not something you should read before you go to bed. But if you were interested in Freud, psychology, and Lacan, you should consider reading it. Next, we have Tiny Love Stories, True Tales of Love in 100 Words or Less. It was from the Modern Love in the New York Times. I bought it as a gift for myself during my trip to New York. The book I read when I was extremely down. It was hilarious, touching, smart. It was like a cup of hot chocolate during winter time. It was a great bedtime reading. Also, sometimes the chocolate in wintertime consider alcohol. Just, it's life, right? It has various meanings and tastes of life. It gives me the warmth and fuzziness in heart, and I know sometimes we all need it. It's a great gift as well. Last but not least, A History of Tango by Borges. I read it because I used to love tango music, but it's Borges. It's never just about one thing, and it was simply not possible just about music. He broadened the topic with history and society and his own cultural interpretation. I found it incredibly inspiring. It's also because it's a summarization of some lectures that he gave. It was not hard to read and it was relatively short. You could read it. If you like tango and you love Borges, you should read it. That's all for all the books I've read in 2024. If you're wondering what book I am currently reading now, I am reading a memoir by Márquez. Because I've watched the 100 Years of Solitude on Netflix, I absolutely love it. I think it's one of the best adaptation I have ever seen from a book to a TV show. That's why I bought this book for a while and I've never thought about picking it up until now. And so far we like it pretty well. Also, you can see my typewriter now, the Lego set. Have you ever had any impulsive purchase when you just want to spend some money to make yourself feel better? That's me with my Lego typewriter. I love it. And the candle is out. That's all for today's video. Next week, I'm going to do a yearly review about my first novel, my curing process, and just a reflection of my year. And I hope I could meet you there. Thank you for watching. See you next time.